I'm Major Candace Ellery, I'm 36, and I built my entire career from zero. No connections, no shortcuts, just discipline and work. For years, I showed up for my family, especially my uncle. I supported him, defended him, even made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. But when he tried to humiliate me inside the Pentagon, in front of everyone, I drew a line that changed the entire dynamic of our family. Have you ever been dismissed or talked down to by someone you've spent your whole life supporting? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're in good company. Before I walk you through what happened that day, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being underestimated, tap like and subscribe. What unfolded next even I didn't expect. I grew up thinking Uncle Gerald was invincible. He had that kind of presence, loud, confident, always the center of attention at family gatherings. My mother's younger brother carried himself like someone who'd figured life out, and for most of my childhood, I believed him. He was the one who showed up with stories, who gave advice nobody asked for, who acted like the family's unofficial CEO. I was the quiet one. Studious. Helpful. The kind of kid who did her homework early and never caused problems. When Gerald's kids struggled with algebra, I tutored them. When his computer crashed before a presentation, I spent hours recovering his files. When he needed a ride from the airport at midnight, I went. He'd clap me on the shoulder and say things like, "You're a good kid, Candace." Real dependable. It felt like praise then. Looking back, I realize it was acknowledgement of utility, not value. When I told him I was applying to the Air Force Academy, he laughed. Not cruelly, but dismissively. The military? You sure you can handle that? I handled it fine. I graduated, earned my commission, went through undergraduate pilot training, and moved into the mobility airlift track. The work was demanding, long hours, constant evaluations, deployments that pulled me away from everything familiar. But I thrived in the structure. By 34, I made Major. 04. For years of consistent performance, leadership roles, and a reputation for getting things done without drama. Gerald never quite understood what any of that meant. When people asked about me, he'd introduce me as my niece who works with planes. Not inaccurate, but not complete either. He'd nod along when I explained my job, then change the subject to his latest project. I told myself it didn't matter. Family wasn't about rank or recognition. So I kept showing up. I flew home for birthdays and holidays. I helped his son with college applications, walking him through essays and financial aid forms. When Gerald hit a rough patch financially, I quietly covered some expenses without making it a thing. The imbalance grew slowly, invisibly. The more responsibility I gained in my career, the more insecure Gerald seemed to become around me. He'd make little comments, "Must be nice having the government pay for everything," or deflect when anyone asked about my deployments. His wife Linda would change the subject. His daughter Emily would roll her eyes, but stay quiet. I stayed loyal because that's what family meant to me. But loyalty, I was learning, doesn't require making yourself smaller. Last spring, Gerald called with an invitation. He'd landed a contract job at the Pentagon IT infrastructure, nothing classified, but it gave him access to the building. He wanted to bring the family down to DC for a tour. "Show everyone what I've been working on," he said. My mother was excited. Gerald's kids were curious. I agreed because it seemed easier than explaining why I didn't want to spend a weekend watching my uncle perform expertise he didn't have. The Thursday before we left, I got pulled into a briefing that ran late. My commander mentioned I'd need my credentials updated for an upcoming assignment. I picked up the new key card from security, black, understated, with a clearance level I didn't discuss outside necessary channels. I tucked it into my wallet and forgot about it. Gerald picked us up from the airport Friday afternoon. He was already in tour guide mode, pointing out landmarks, narrating traffic patterns, telling us about the incredible access his badge provided. My mother asked polite questions. Emily stared out the window. I checked emails on my phone. That night at dinner, Gerald dominated every conversation. He talked over my mother 3 times. He interrupted Emily mid-sentence to correct an irrelevant detail about metro lines. When the waiter brought the check, Gerald made a show of pulling out his Pentagon badge. Contractor rate, he said, winking. Perks of the job. I said nothing. He kept going. You know, Candace, you should see if the Air Force has opportunities here. I could probably put in a word, get you connected. I smiled. I'm good where I am. He shrugged. Just saying. It's who you know in this town. Linda tried to smooth things over. Gerald's just excited to show you all around. I nodded. I was used to this. The next morning, Gerald transformed into what I can only describe as a self-appointed tour commander. He dictated seat assignments in the rental car, corrected my mother's pronunciation of a general's name, and lectured Emily about proper conduct in federal buildings. Don't touch anything. Don't wander off. Follow my lead, he said, looking at each of us in turn. When we arrived at the Pentagon, he strutted through the entry process like he owned the building. Security waved us through after checking IDs. Gerald lingered at the checkpoint, chatting with one of the guards as if they were old friends. The guard nodded politely, clearly humoring him. As we walked through the corridors, Gerald kept up a running commentary, mostly wrong, occasionally right, always delivered with absolute confidence. He pointed out offices he'd never been inside, speculated about meetings he wasn't part of, and name-dropped officials he'd never met. My mother smiled indulgently. Emily looked embarrassed. I stayed quiet. Then he noticed my lanyard. The black one with the updated key card attached. He frowned. That's all the Air Force gives you? Thought officers had real badges. I didn't respond. Civilians don't usually recognize what classified credentials look like. Gerald interpreted my silence as validation. Yeah, figured. Anyway, everyone stay close. Don't touch anything. I'm responsible if something goes wrong. We approached a bank of elevators. One was standard access, clearly marked for general personnel and visitors. The other had a small placard, senior leadership and flag-level transit only. Gerald stopped. Okay, stairs for us. This elevator is for high command only. We're not authorized. I glanced at the elevator, then at him. It's fine. I have access. He turned sharply. Candace, don't argue. Contractors get in trouble if tourists start touching things. I kept my voice level. Gerald, I'm allowed to, he cut me off, louder now. Take the stairs. Don't embarrass me. People nearby looked over. My mother glanced down. Emily shifted uncomfortably. I felt something settle inside me, a quiet, final clarity. I was done making myself smaller to protect his ego. I stepped past him. Swiped the black keycard. The screen lit up red. Access granted. Command auth, Shadow 1. The doors slid open immediately. My mother gasped softly. Emily whispered, holy, wow. The contractor escort who'd been trailing us straightened, recognizing the clearance level instantly. Gerald went completely still. His face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. I looked at him calmly. We'll take the elevator. Inside the elevator, no one spoke. Gerald stood behind me, staring at the floor. My mother kept glancing between us, confusion and something like pride flickering across her face. Emily looked stunned. The doors closed. The ride lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt longer. When we reached the appropriate floor, the doors opened and a Pentagon liaison was waiting. He looked at my keycard, then at me, and nodded. Major Ellery. Good to see you. Morning, I said evenly. He gestured down the corridor. This way. Gerald followed in silence. The man who'd been holding court all morning, lecturing about protocol and access, now walked 3 steps behind me. The liaison directed his questions to me. He confirmed details of the tour route with me. He asked if I needed anything. Gerald said nothing. As we walked, my mother finally broke the silence, her voice soft. Why didn't you tell us your work was like that? I kept my tone gentle. My job doesn't matter outside the mission. You're my family. That's enough. She absorbed that, nodding slowly. Emily whispered to me as we paused near a windowed corridor. I didn't know you were important. I turned to her. I'm not important. I'm accountable. The distinction mattered to me. Rank wasn't about status. It was about responsibility, being trusted with resources, people, decisions that carried weight. Gerald had always treated rank like a trophy. Something to display, to leverage, to use for positioning himself above others. I'd spent years watching him do that, and I'd enabled it by staying quiet, by letting him misrepresent what I did, by shrinking my actual role so he could feel big. The rest of the tour continued without incident. Gerald's voice, usually so dominant, stayed muted. He nodded when the liaison pointed things out. He didn't correct anyone. He didn't narrate. When we passed other officers, he kept his eyes forward. At one point, we walked by a group of senior staff, a mix of OSIXS and a brigadier general. One of them recognized me, nodded in passing. "Major." I returned the nod. "Sir." Gerald watched the exchange, his jaw tight. After the tour ended, we filed back toward the exit. The contractor escort thanked us for visiting, then turned to me specifically. "Appreciate your service, Major." "Thank you," I said simply. Gerald walked ahead, moving quickly, as if distance could erase what had happened. In the parking lot, he fumbled with the car keys, his hands unsteady. Linda touched his arm gently, but he pulled away. The drive back to the hotel was silent except for the hum of traffic. My mother tried once to start a conversation, asking Emily about her college plans, but the effort fizzled. When we arrived, Gerald parked and got out without a word. Inside the hotel, we dispersed to our rooms. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the black key card on the nightstand. I thought about all the years I'd spent managing Gerald's ego. All the times I'd downplayed my work, deflected questions about my rank, let him introduce me as someone who worked with planes. I thought about the moment at the elevator, his certainty, his dismissiveness, his need to control a situation he didn't understand. And I thought about my mother's face when the screen flashed red. That look of surprise, followed by something else. Recognition, maybe. Or relief. An hour later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Gerald standing there, arms crossed, face flushed. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, letting him in. He paced near the window, not looking at me. "You humiliated me." I kept my voice calm. "I didn't humiliate you, Gerald. I used my credentials." He spun around. "You could have warned me. You could have said something before we got there. You didn't ask. You assumed." His hands clenched. I looked stupid in front of my colleagues. "Do you understand that? You made me look like I didn't know what I was talking about." I met his eyes. "You didn't know what you were talking about. The system just confirmed it." He recoiled slightly, as if I'd struck him. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," I said quietly, "is spending years pretending I'm less than I am so you can feel comfortable." He stared at me, his face cycling through anger, embarrassment, disbelief. "Family doesn't pull rank." I shook my head. "I didn't pull rank. You tried to push yours. And when it didn't work, you're upset that reality caught up." He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "So what, you're just going to lord this over me now?" "No," I said. "I'm going to stop pretending. If you want a relationship with me, it has to start with respect. I'm not shrinking myself to protect your ego anymore." His face went through another shift, something between shame and defiance. He looked away, jaw working. "This isn't how family treats each other." "Family doesn't belittle each other either," I said. "But you've been doing that for years." I just didn't call it out. He stood there for a long moment, then turned toward the door. His hand rested on the handle. "I don't know what you want from me." "Respect," I said simply. "That's all. Just respect." He left without another word. I sat back down on the bed, feeling the weight of the conversation settle. It wasn't satisfying, exactly. There was no catharsis, no dramatic breakthrough. Just a line drawn in the sand. That night, I called my commander to check in on some scheduling details. Routine work talk, but it grounded me. Reminded me of the world where my rank wasn't a weapon or a shield, just a marker of responsibility. When I hung up, I felt steadier. The next morning, the family gathered for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Gerald was already seated when I arrived, nursing a coffee, his face drawn. Linda smiled tightly. Emily looked between us like she was waiting for something to explode. My mother patted the seat next to her, and I sat. Conversation was stilted. Gerald contributed nothing. Linda tried to fill the silence with questions about the tour, about the city, about anything that wasn't the elephant in the room. Halfway through the meal, Emily looked at me. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do people treat you differently? Because of your rank? I considered the question. Some do, but the ones worth working with don't. They care about whether you do your job well, whether you take care of your people. She nodded slowly. That makes sense. Gerald's fork clattered against his plate. He stood abruptly. I need some air. He didn't come back to breakfast. Linda followed him out after a few minutes, leaving me with my mother and Emily. My mother stirred her tea, not drinking it. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I told her. She looked up, her eyes tired. He's always been like this. Competitive. He needs to be the one people look up to. I know. But he's not a bad person. I didn't say he was, I said carefully. But needing to be the one people look up to doesn't give him the right to diminish everyone else. She nodded slowly, absorbing that. Emily spoke up. He does that to me too. Not about rank or work, but I don't know. He has to be right about everything. My mother sighed. He's insecure. Always has been. Your grandfather was hard on him growing up, and I think, Mom, I interrupted gently. I understand why he is the way he is. But understanding it doesn't mean I have to accept how he treats people. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. We finished breakfast quietly. Afterward, Emily and I walked around the block while my mother went to check on Gerald and Linda. Do you think he'll apologize? Emily asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. Or maybe he'll just avoid talking about it and hope it goes away. She kicked a pebble along the sidewalk. That's what he usually does. We walked in silence for a bit. Then she said, I think it's cool. What you do. Thanks. I mean it. I didn't really get it before. But seeing how people reacted to you yesterday, that was real. Not just talk. I glanced at her. What your dad does is real too. Contractors keep a lot of critical systems running. It's important work. Yeah, but he acts like it's more than it is, she said. And you act like what you do is less. I smiled faintly. I guess we both have things to work on. When we got back to the hotel, Gerald was in the lobby, sitting alone on a bench near the window. He looked up when we approached, then looked away. Emily hesitated, then walked over to him. Dad? He didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, yeah. You okay? He rubbed his face. I don't know. I stayed back, giving them space. My mother appeared from the elevator, saw the scene, and came to stand beside me. He's struggling, she said softly. I know. He feels like you took something from him. I turned to her. I didn't take anything. I just stopped pretending I had less. She didn't argue. After a moment, Gerald stood and walked over to us. His face was guarded, his posture stiff. I think we should head home. Okay, my mother said. The drive to the airport was quiet. Gerald kept his eyes on the road. Linda sat beside him, occasionally glancing back at us. Emily dozed in the seat next to me. My mother stared out the window. At the terminal, we said brief goodbyes. Gerald's hug was perfunctory, his voice flat. Safe flight. You too, I said. Linda hugged me longer, whispering, give him time. I nodded. Emily hugged me tightly. Thanks for being honest. Always, I said. My mother and I had a later flight, so we stayed behind. As we sat in the terminal, she finally asked the question I knew was coming. Do you think he'll get over this? I thought about it. Maybe. But it depends on whether he's willing to look at why it happened in the first place. And if he's not? I met her eyes. Then he won't. And I'll be okay with that. She smiled sadly. You've gotten strong. I've always been strong, Mom. I just stopped hiding it. She reached over and squeezed my hand. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat together, waiting for our flight, watching people move through the terminal. When we boarded, I settled into my seat and pulled out my tablet, reviewing some reports I'd been putting off. My mother fell asleep beside me. I thought about Gerald. About years of small concessions, tiny erasures, moments where I'd let him reshape the truth to fit his comfort. I thought about the elevator. About the look on his face when the screen turned red. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. But I also felt clear. The line was drawn. What happened next was up to him. When we landed, my mother and I parted ways at baggage claim. She was driving home. I was catching a connecting flight back to base. Call me when you get in, she said. I will. She hugged me. I'm proud of you. I don't say that enough. You say it plenty. She pulled back, looking at me seriously. Not for your rank. For standing up. Even when it was hard. I smiled. Thanks, Mom. I watched her walk toward the exit, her figure disappearing into the crowd. Then I turned and headed toward my gate, already thinking about the week ahead, briefings, crew rotations, the steady rhythm of work. The work that mattered, with or without anyone's approval. Word didn't spread officially. But word always spreads. A week after I returned to base, I got a call from a colleague who'd been at the Pentagon that day. He'd heard from someone who'd heard from someone else. So you're Shadow One? He asked, amused. I am. And your uncle tried to stop you from using the flag elevator? I sighed. Something like that. He laughed. That must have been something to see. It was awkward. Bet it was. I didn't elaborate and he didn't push. But the story had legs. Within a month, I heard it retold 3 different ways, each version slightly more dramatic than the last. I corrected the details when I could and ignored it when I couldn't. Meanwhile, Gerald went quiet. No calls. No texts. My mother mentioned he seemed withdrawn but didn't elaborate. Linda sent a brief message thanking me for the trip and saying they were working through some things. Emily texted occasionally, mostly about college stuff, never mentioning her father. I focused on work. We had a major exercise coming up, joint operations, complicated logistics, tight timelines. It demanded my full attention, and I gave it willingly. The structure was a relief after the emotional mess of the family trip. 2 months later, my mother called. Gerald wants to talk to you. I paused. Okay. He's been. I don't know. Different. Quieter. Linda says he's been seeing a counselor. That's good. Will you talk to him? If he calls. I considered it. If he's ready to have a real conversation, yes. What does that mean? It means if he's ready to talk about what happened without making excuses, I'll listen. She was quiet for a moment. I think he is. Then I'll talk to him. 3 days later, my phone rang. Gerald's name on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. Candace. His voice was rough, uncertain. Hey. Silence. Then, I owe you an apology. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear what came next. I was threatened by you, he continued. By your success. And I dealt with it by trying to make you smaller. That wasn't fair. I'm sorry. I sat down. Thank you for saying that. I've been thinking about it a lot. About how I treated you over the years. How I talked about your work, I don't know. I built my identity on being the strong one in the family. The one people looked up to. And when I saw that you'd surpassed me, that you were actually the one with authority, it cracked something. I listened. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, he said. I know I have to earn that. But I wanted you to know I see it now. What I did. I appreciate that, I said carefully. It's a start. A start, he repeated. Yeah, I guess it is. We talked for a few more minutes. Not about anything heavy, just small updates, surface-level check-ins. When we hung up, I felt something shift. Not resolution. Not reconciliation. Just possibility. Over the next few months, Gerald and I exchanged occasional messages. Nothing deep. Updates about family, brief observations, the kind of contact that keeps a connection alive without demanding intimacy. He didn't revert to his old patterns. He didn't try to dominate conversations or position himself above me. He just existed in the family space without needing to own it. Linda mentioned he'd stepped back from some of his contractor work, that he was spending more time at home, reassessing priorities. Emily said he seemed less intense. My mother reported that he'd apologized to her too, for how he'd spoken to her over the years. Slowly, carefully, he was rebuilding. Not into someone new exactly, but into someone more honest about his limitations. I didn't rush to embrace the change. I watched it, acknowledged it, but kept my boundaries firm. Respect, I'd learned, wasn't a one-time transaction. It was a pattern, built over time, proven through consistency. And I wasn't willing to compromise that again. 6 months after the Pentagon incident, I got news. I'd been selected for lieutenant colonel. Oh, 5. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for early fall. I called my mother first. She cried. Then I called Emily, who cheered. Then, after a pause, I called Gerald. Congratulations, he said, and his voice sounded genuine. Thank you. You earned it. I did. He was quiet for a moment. Can I come? To the ceremony? I thought about it. Yes, if you want to. I do. The ceremony took place on a clear October morning. My unit gathered in the base auditorium, family members filling the back rows. My mother sat in the front, beaming. Emily sat beside her, recording on her phone. Linda and Gerald sat a few rows back, subdued but present. Colonel Drew Harland, my reviewing officer, stood at the podium and read the citation. He talked about my years of service, my leadership, my deployments. He mentioned the trust I'd earned from my crews, the respect I'd built across commands. When he called me forward, I walked to the center of the room. My mother came up to remove my major's oak leaves. Colonel Harland affixed the lieutenant colonel's silver oak leaves in their place. The room applauded. I saluted. He returned it. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel Hillary. Thank you, sir. Afterward, people filtered through to shake my hand, offer congratulations, take photos. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering how proud she was. Emily hugged me next, grinning. This is so cool. Linda hugged me briefly, smiling. Then Gerald stepped forward. He looked at me for a moment, then extended his hand. I shook it. You earned every bit of this, he said quietly. I held his gaze. I know. He nodded. I'm proud of you. It landed differently than it would have years ago. Not as validation I needed, but as acknowledgement he owed. Thank you, I said. We stood there for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Then he stepped back and someone else moved in to congratulate me. The reception afterward was held in the officers' club. People mingled, ate, shared stories. My mother stayed close, introducing herself to my colleagues, asking questions about my work with genuine curiosity. Emily gravitated towards some of the younger officers, asking about their paths into the service. Gerald and Linda stayed on the periphery, polite but not intrusive. At one point, I found myself standing near the window, watching the afternoon light stretch across the flight line. Colonel Harland approached, holding a glass of water. Good turnout. Yeah, I said. Family made the trip. He glanced toward where Gerald stood, talking quietly with Linda. That your uncle? The one from the Pentagon story. I winced. You heard about that? He smiled. I hear about everything. Comes with the job. It wasn't my finest moment. Disagree, he said. Sounds like you handled it perfectly. Calm, professional, didn't escalate. I shrugged. I just used my credentials. Exactly. You didn't make it personal. You let the system speak for itself. That's good leadership. I considered that. I guess. He looked at me seriously. A lot of officers struggle with family dynamics, especially when family doesn't understand what we do. You set a boundary without burning a bridge. That's not easy. It didn't feel like a win at the time. The best decisions rarely do, he said. But look around. You're here. You're respected. Your family showed up. That's the result of years of choices, not just one moment. I nodded slowly. He clapped me on the shoulder. Enjoy today, Colonel. You earned it. He walked away, leaving me with the view and the noise of the celebration behind me. I thought about the elevator, about the look on Gerald's face, about the months that followed, the silence, the struggle, the slow, fragile rebuilding. I thought about my mother's question, do you think he'll get over this? The answer, I realized, was more complicated than yes or no. He was getting over it, but not by forgetting, by facing it, by sitting with the discomfort of realizing he'd been wrong, that his ego had cost him something real. And I was getting over it too. Not by forgiving and forgetting, but by holding the line. By refusing to shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. by building a life where my worth wasn't up for debate. The elevator moment wasn't about rank. It was about the end of pretending. Pretending I was less capable, less accomplished, less valuable than I was. Pretending someone else's insecurity was my responsibility. I finished my drink and turned back toward the room. My mother waved me over. Emily was laughing at something one of the junior officers had said. Gerald stood nearby, watching quietly, his expression unreadable but not hostile. I walked over and the conversation shifted to include me. We talked about deployment stories, about training mishaps, about the strange and mundane realities of military life. Gerald listened. He didn't dominate. He didn't correct. He just listened. At one point, Emily asked me, "What's the hardest part of your job?" I thought about it. Making decisions that affect people's lives. Knowing that what I choose, what I prioritize, has real consequences for the people under my command. She nodded seriously. Gerald spoke up, his voice quiet. "That's real leadership." I looked at him. He met my eyes. "I mean it," he said. "What you do matters." I didn't understand that before, but I do now. I held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you." It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. The reception wound down as the afternoon turned to evening. People started drifting out, saying their goodbyes. My mother hugged me again, promising to call soon. Emily took one last selfie with me, grinning. Linda thanked me for inviting them. Gerald shook my hand again. "Take care of yourself, Candace." "You too, Gerald." He hesitated, then added, "If you ever need anything." "I'm here." I smiled faintly. "I know." They left, and I stood in the emptying room, feeling the weight of the day settle. Colonel Harland approached one last time. "Heading out?" "Soon," I said. "Got some paperwork to finish." He laughed. "Of course you do. Never changes, does it?" "No, sir. It doesn't." He left, and I stayed a few more minutes, looking around the room. At the flags, the plaques, the photos of past commanders. At the life I'd built, step by step, choice by choice. I thought about the girl I'd been, quiet, helpful, always making space for others. And I thought about the woman I'd become, still quiet, still helpful, but no longer willing to erase herself in the process. The elevator moment was just one moment. But it marked a shift. A line drawn. A refusal to go back. I picked up my cover, straightened my uniform, and walked out into the evening. The flight line stretched before me, silent and still. Somewhere out there, missions were being planned, crews were being briefed, decisions were being made. And I was part of it. Not because of a keycard or a rank, but because I'd earned my place, step by step, and refused to apologize for it. I thought about Gerald, about the look on his face when the elevator doors opened, about the months that followed, about the apology, the distance, the fragile rebuilding. And I realized something. I didn't need him to understand everything I did. I didn't need him to be proud of me. I just needed him to respect that I'd earned what I had. And if he couldn't do that, I'd be okay. Because my worth wasn't determined by his approval. It never had been. I walked toward my car, the ceremony behind me, the future ahead. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to emerge. I thought about tomorrow, briefings, decisions, responsibilities. The steady rhythm of work that mattered. And I smiled. Because I knew exactly who I was. And I wasn't pretending anymore. Linda called 3 weeks after the ceremony. "He's struggling," she said without preamble. I was in my office, reviewing flight manifests. I set down my pen. "What do you mean?" "He won't talk about it, but I can see it. He's withdrawn. Quiet. He comes home from work and just sits in his office." I listened. "Has something happened at work?" "Not directly. But I think word got around. About what happened at the Pentagon. Nothing official, but you know how these contractor communities are. People talk." I did know. Defense contractors worked in tight circles. Reputations mattered. And Gerald had built his on projecting authority he didn't actually have. His supervisor pulled him aside last week, Linda continued. Asked if there were any incidents during his recent Pentagon access that needed to be documented. Gerald said no, but the fact they asked. It rattled him, I finished. Yes. I rubbed my temples. Linda, I didn't report anything. I didn't file a complaint. I just used my credentials. I know that. And Gerald knows that. But the optics, someone saw what happened. Someone who works with him. And now there are questions about his judgment. I felt a flicker of something, not quite guilt, but awareness of consequences rippling outward. What do you need from me? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Maybe nothing. I just thought you should know he's not doing well. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? The question wasn't accusatory. Just honest. I thought about it. Yes. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop hurting me. I know, she said softly. And for what it's worth, I think you were right. To do what you did. He was out of line. Thank you for saying that. We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at the manifests without seeing them. I thought about Gerald, sitting in his office, facing the cracks in the identity he'd built. I thought about how much of his self-worth was tied to being respected, being seen as important, being the authority in any room. And I thought about how fragile that foundation had been all along. That night, I called my mother. Did you know Gerald's having a hard time? Linda mentioned it, she said. Are you okay? I don't know. I feel complicated about it. You're allowed to, my mother said. You didn't do anything wrong, Candace. But that doesn't mean it's easy to watch someone struggle. I keep thinking about whether I could have handled it differently. How? I didn't have an answer. Exactly, she said gently. You used your credentials. You didn't make a scene. You didn't humiliate him on purpose. He humiliated himself by assuming you were less than you are. But the consequences are his to deal with, she interrupted. Not yours. You're not responsible for managing his ego at the expense of your own dignity. I absorbed that. When did you get so wise? She laughed softly. Around the time I realized I'd been doing the same thing for years. Making myself smaller so the people around me could feel bigger. Watching you stand up for yourself made me think about all the times I didn't. We talked until late, about family dynamics, about patterns we inherit, about the cost of keeping peace. When I hung up, I felt steadier. But the situation with Gerald continued to gnaw at me. 2 weeks later, Emily called. Dad's really depressed. I was walking back from a briefing. I stopped. How bad? Bad. He barely talks. He's not eating much. Mom's worried. Has he seen his counselor? He's stopped going. Says there's no point. I closed my eyes. Emily, I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know either, she admitted. I thought you should know. He won't talk about what happened, but it's obvious that's what this is about. I can't fix this for him. I know. But maybe? I don't know. Maybe if you talk to him. I thought about it. If he wants to talk, he knows how to reach me. But I'm not going to chase him down and apologize for being qualified for my job. She was quiet. That's fair. I'm sorry he's struggling, Emily. I really am. But this is something he has to work through on his own. I get it, she said. I just wanted to try. After we hung up, I stood on the flight line, watching a cargo plane taxi toward the runway. The weight of other people's pain was familiar. I dealt with it in my command all the time. Sailors struggling with deployments, personal crises, career setbacks. But this was different. This was family. And the line between compassion and enabling felt thinner. That weekend, I got a text from Gerald. Just 3 words, can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, when you're ready to speak respectfully, yes. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, I'm trying to be. I called him. He answered on the first ring. Candace. His voice was hoarse. Hey. Silence stretched between us. Then he said, I don't know how to do this. Do what? Apologize without making excuses. Admit I was wrong without trying to justify it. I keep starting sentences and realizing they're all just me trying to make it about my feelings instead of what I did. I sat down on my couch. That's actually a good start. Recognizing that. Linda says I built my entire identity on being the authority. That when you showed me I wasn't, not in the way I thought, it broke something. Did it? He was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, it did. I keep thinking about all the times I talked over you, dismissed your work, acted like I knew better. And I keep asking myself why. Why did I need that so badly? What did you come up with? I was scared, he said quietly. Of being ordinary. Of not mattering. Of people realizing I wasn't as important as I acted. I listened. And you were this reminder, he continued, that real authority is earned, not performed. That actual accomplishment doesn't need to be announced. And instead of being proud of you, I felt threatened. Which is pathetic. It's human, I said. But it's still your responsibility to deal with. I know. We talked for over an hour. About his childhood, about our grandfather's expectations, about the pressure he'd felt to be the family's success story. About how my quiet competence had always made him feel inadequate. I'm sorry, he finally said. For all of it. For years of making you smaller so I could feel bigger. For that day at the Pentagon. For every time I dismissed what you'd accomplished. Thank you, I said. I mean it, Candace. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't. He absorbed that. Where do we go from here? I thought about it. That depends on you. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on who we actually are. Not who you wish we were or who I was when I was easier to manage. I want that, he said. But I don't know if I know how. Then figure it out, I said, not unkindly. Go back to counseling. Do the work. But don't put the burden of your growth on me. Fair enough. We hung up shortly after. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, feeling the weight of the conversation settle. Over the next months, Gerald did go back to counseling. Linda mentioned it in passing. He was working with a therapist who specialized in identity issues and family dynamics. He didn't call me often. When he did, the conversations were brief, surface level. Updates about his work, questions about mine that felt genuine rather than competitive. Small steps. Meanwhile, his reputation at work underwent a quiet correction. His supervisor, from what Linda shared, had noted the overstepping incident in his file, not a formal reprimand, but a documented reminder about appropriate conduct in secure facilities. Gerald had to take a remediation course on protocol and access boundaries. It was humiliating for him, but necessary. He became more careful, less performative, more focused on the actual work rather than the appearance of authority. At home, the shift was more visible. Emily reported that he'd stopped dominating dinner conversations, that he actually listened when she talked about her college plans. Linda said he'd apologized to her too, for years of condescension, for dismissing her opinions, for making decisions without consultation. The family was recalibrating, finding a new equilibrium. And I watched from a distance, neither involved nor disconnected. Just present, with boundaries intact. My own life continued its steady rhythm. My command responsibilities increased as I settled into the lieutenant colonel role. I oversaw larger missions, managed more personnel, made decisions with greater consequence. The work was demanding but fulfilling. I was good at it, not because of rank, but because I genuinely cared about the people under my command and the missions we supported. In January, 6 months after my promotion, I received orders for a new assignment. A staff position at Air Mobility Command Headquarters. More responsibility, higher visibility, a clear path toward full colonel if I continued performing. I called my mother first. Then Emily. Then, after a pause, Gerald. Congratulations, he said when I told him. That's a big deal. It is. You'll be great at it. Thanks. He hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think about that day? At the Pentagon. I considered the question. Sometimes. Do you regret it? No, I said honestly. I regret that it was necessary. But I don't regret doing it. He absorbed that. I think about it all the time. About how certain I was that I was right, that you were out of line. And then that screen lit up and everything I thought I knew just collapsed. Gerald, no, let me finish, he said. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because I want you to know that it changed something. Not just how I see you, but how I see myself. And I'm trying to be better. It's slow, and I mess up, but I'm trying. I can see that, I said quietly. And I appreciate it. I don't expect us to be close, he continued. Not like we were when you were a kid. But I want you to know I respect you. really respect you. Not just your rank, but who you are. It landed softly, without fanfare. Thank you, Gerald. That means something. We talked a bit longer, then hung up. I sat with the conversation, feeling something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not reconciliation in the traditional sense. Just acknowledgement that people could change, slowly and imperfectly, if they chose to do the work. Spring arrived. My new assignment started in June, which gave me a few months to transition my current command and prepare for the move. During that time, Gerald and I exchanged occasional messages. He sent an article about mobility operations he thought I'd find interesting. I sent congratulations when Emily got accepted to her top choice college. Small threads of connection, maintained without pressure. In May, my mother invited me home for a family dinner. Just the immediate family, she said. Nothing big. But it would be nice to have everyone together before you move. I agreed. The dinner was at my mother's house. Gerald and Linda arrived first, bringing wine. Emily came separately, driving herself now with her new license. We gathered in the kitchen while my mother finished cooking. The conversation was easier than it had been in years. Gerald asked about my new assignment with genuine curiosity, listening to my answers without trying to one-up or redirect. He talked about his work without exaggeration, acknowledging challenges without framing them as crises only he could solve. Emily talked about college plans. Linda shared updates about her job. My mother moved between us, smiling, visibly relieved at the lack of tension. At dinner, Gerald raised his glass. To Candace. Congratulations on the new assignment. You've earned everything you've achieved. Everyone echoed the toast. I looked around the table, at faces I'd known my whole life, at relationships that had bent but not broken, at a family finding its way toward something healthier. Thank you, I said. All of you. For being here. The evening continued without drama. We ate, talked, laughed. Gerald didn't dominate. I didn't withdraw. We simply existed together as equals. As we were clearing dishes, Gerald pulled me aside. Can I show you something? I followed him to the living room. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo, and handed it to me. It was his contractor badge. The standard kind with basic access. No inflated authority, no exaggerated claims. Just his name, his company, his actual clearance level. I asked for a corrected badge, he said. The old one had some inaccuracies. Things I'd embellished over time. This one's accurate. I looked at the badge, then at him. That must have been hard. It was. But it felt right. I spent so long pretending to be more than I was. I'm tired of pretending. I handed back the phone. I'm proud of you for that. He smiled, a genuine smile without the usual bravado. Coming from you, that actually means something. We rejoined the others. The rest of the evening passed quietly, comfortably. When I left, everyone hugged me, Gerald's hug lasting a moment longer, his voice quiet. Good luck with everything, Candace. I mean that. I know, I said. You too. The move to Air Mobility Command Headquarters happened in mid-June. The transition was smooth, new office, new team, new challenges. I settled in quickly, finding my rhythm in the broader strategic work. Months passed. I stayed in touch with family through calls and messages. Gerald's texts were infrequent but consistent, updates about Emily's college adjustment, photos from family gatherings, occasional questions about policy issues he was genuinely curious about. The dynamic had fundamentally shifted. He no longer positioned himself above me. He acknowledged my expertise without resentment. He participated in family life without needing to dominate it. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments where old patterns surfaced, a comment that came out wrong, a flash of defensiveness when challenged. But he caught himself more often, apologized more readily, adjusted more willingly. In October, Emily called. Dad's been nominated for an award at his company. Employee of the Quarter or something. That's great. He wanted me to tell you. He was too nervous to call himself. I smiled. Tell him I said congratulations. Will you call him? I think it would mean a lot. I did. Gerald answered, surprised. Emily said you got an award at work. Oh. Yeah. It's not a big deal, just, Gerald, I interrupted gently. Let yourself have the win. You earned it. He was quiet. Then, thanks, Candace. Yeah, thanks. We talked for a few minutes about his work, about mine, about Emily's first semester. The conversation flowed naturally, without strain. When we hung up, I realized something had changed. Not dramatically, not suddenly. But the relationship had found a new baseline, one built on honesty rather than performance, on respect rather than hierarchy. In December, my mother called with news. I'm thinking about moving. Downsizing. The house is too big now that it's just me. Where are you thinking? Closer to you, actually. There's a nice community about 30 minutes from your base. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. I'd love that, Mom. Gerald offered to help with the move. And, before you worry, he's not trying to take over. He genuinely just offered to help load boxes and drive a truck. I smiled. That sounds good. The move happened in January. Gerald, Linda, Emily, and I all showed up to help pack. We worked together efficiently, sorting, boxing, loading. Gerald deferred to my mother's decisions about what to keep and what to donate. He didn't try to reorganize her system or override her choices. At one point, we were both in the garage, loading furniture into the truck. Gerald straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. This reminds me of when you moved into the dorms at the academy. You remember? I do. You helped load my car. I was so proud of you that day, he said quietly. I don't think I ever told you that. But I was. I just didn't know how to say it without making it about me somehow. I set down the box I was holding. You're saying it now. He nodded. Yeah, I guess I am. We finished loading in comfortable silence. That evening, after everything was unpacked at my mother's new place, we ordered pizza and sat in her living room. Boxes were still stacked against the walls, but the space already felt like home. Gerald raised a beer. To new chapters. We all echoed the toast. I looked around the room, at my mother, content in her new space, at Linda and Emily, laughing about something on Emily's phone, at Gerald, relaxed and present. This was what healing looked like. Not dramatic, not perfect. Just steady, incremental progress toward something healthier. Toward relationships based on truth rather than illusion. Toward family that didn't require anyone to shrink themselves. The conversation drifted, easy and unhurried. At one point, Gerald caught my eye across the room and nodded, a simple acknowledgement, nothing more. I nodded back. The elevator moment felt like years ago, though it had only been a little over a year. The public humiliation, the shock, the fallout, all of it had led here. To this room, these people, this quiet peace. I thought about what Colonel Harland had said at my promotion ceremony. The best decisions rarely feel like wins at the time. He was right. Setting that boundary hadn't felt triumphant. It had felt necessary and painful and uncertain. But the result, this recalibrated family, these honest relationships, this version of Gerald who was slowly becoming someone more genuine, was worth the discomfort. As the evening wound down, I helped my mother set up her bedroom. She sat on the edge of her new bed, looking around. This feels right, she said. Being closer to you. Starting fresh. I'm glad you're here, Mom. She looked at me seriously. You know what you did changed more than just your relationship with Gerald. What do you mean? You showed all of us that it's okay to take up space. To refuse to be diminished. I've been thinking about all the ways I made myself smaller over the years for your father, for other people, even for Gerald sometimes. Watching you refuse to do that gave me permission to stop too. I sat beside her. You've always been strong, Mom. Maybe, but I wasn't always honest about my worth. You taught me that. We hugged, and I felt the full weight of what had shifted. It wasn't just about Gerald's transformation. It was about a whole family learning to value truth over comfort, respect over appeasement. Before I left that night, Gerald walked me to my car. Thank you for coming today. Of course. He hesitated. I know I still have work to do. On myself, on how I show up. But I want you to know I'm committed to it. I can see that, Gerald. And I appreciate it. He extended his hand. I shook it. Then, impulsively, he pulled me into a brief hug. I'm proud of you, Candace. For everything you are. I hugged him back. Thanks, Uncle Gerald. When I drove away, I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway, hands in his pockets, looking smaller somehow but more genuine. The work wasn't finished. It probably never would be. People didn't transform overnight, and old patterns had deep roots. But the trajectory had changed. And that was enough. Spring brought new challenges at work. A major reorganization, increased operational tempo, complex coordination with other commands. I thrived in the chaos, drawing on years of experience and the steady confidence I'd built. In April, I received notification. I was being considered for promotion to full colonel. 06. The board would convene in the fall, with results announced by winter. I told my mother first. She cried, as expected. I told Emily, who cheered. I told Gerald. That's incredible, Candace. Seriously. It's not guaranteed. The board is competitive. You'll make it, he said with certainty. You've earned it. His confidence touched me. Not because I needed his validation, but because it was genuine. No longer performance, no longer ego. Just honest belief in my capabilities. The months between notification and the board results were busy. I focused on my work, on my team, on the missions that mattered. I didn't obsess over the promotion. I'd learned long ago that you couldn't control boards or timing, only your own performance. In November, the results came through. I'd been selected. Full colonel. 06. I sat in my office, staring at the notification, feeling the weight of it settle. 20 years of service. Countless missions, deployments, challenges overcome. And now this. I called my mother. She screamed with joy. I called Emily. She congratulated me with genuine excitement. I called Gerald. You made it. His voice was thick with emotion. I did. I'm so proud of you, Candace. God, I'm so proud. Thank you, Gerald. When's the ceremony? January. After the holidays. I'll be there. We all will. If you want us. I do, I said. I really do. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for mid-January at my headquarters. Bigger than the last one, with more attendees, more formality. I sent invitations to my immediate family. They all confirmed. The day arrived cold and clear. The ceremony was held in the base auditorium, flags lining the walls, officers in dress uniform filling the seats. My family sat in the front row, my mother, Gerald, Linda, Emily. Colonel Harland, now a brigadier general, presided over the ceremony. He read the citation, detailing my career, my accomplishments, my leadership. When he called me forward, my mother came up to remove my Lieutenant Colonel oak leaves. General Harland pinned the full Colonel Eagles on my shoulders. The room erupted in applause. I saluted. He returned it. Congratulations, Colonel Ellery. Thank you, sir. Afterward, people lined up to congratulate me. My mother hugged me tightly, tears streaming. Emily hugged me next, grinning. Linda hugged me, whispering congratulations. Then Gerald stepped forward. He didn't try to hug me immediately. He just looked at me, taking in the moment. You did it, he said quietly. We did, I corrected gently. All of us. Getting here took a lot of people's support. He shook his head. No, this is yours. You earned every bit of it. I smiled. Thank you, Gerald. He pulled me into a hug then, and I felt him shaking slightly. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you, he said. Really see you. You see me now. That's what matters. He nodded, stepping back to let others through. The reception was held in the officers' club. People mingled, shared stories, celebrated. My family stayed close, talking with my colleagues, asking questions, genuinely engaging. At one point, I found myself standing with Gerald near the window, watching the activity. Can I tell you something? He asked. Sure. When that elevator door opened at the Pentagon, when that screen flashed your call sign, I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. Like everything I thought I knew about myself, about our family, about where I stood in the world, all of it was just wrong. I listened. It took me months to realize that feeling wasn't about you humiliating me. It was about me finally seeing the truth. That I'd been living in a fantasy where I was the important one, where my authority mattered most. And you'd been quietly doing the real work all along. Gerald, let me finish, he said. That moment broke something. But it also gave me a chance to rebuild on something honest. And I'm grateful for that. Even though it hurt. Even though I handled it terribly at first. I'm grateful. I put my hand on his arm. I'm grateful too. For your willingness to change. That's not easy. No, he agreed. It's not. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebration. Emily approached, linking her arm through Gerald's. You two okay over here? Yeah, Gerald said. We're good. She smiled. Good. Because Mom wants family photos. We gathered for photos, formal ones, casual ones, silly ones Emily insisted on. In one, Gerald stood beside me, both of us in frame, my Colonel Eagles visible on my shoulders. No competition. No tension. Just family. As the reception wound down, General Harland approached. Colonel Ellery. A word. I excused myself, following him to a quieter corner. Congratulations again. Well deserved. Thank you, sir. He glanced toward where my family stood. That's your uncle? The one from the Pentagon. I winced. That story really made the rounds, didn't it? He smiled. It did. But I bring it up because I wanted to tell you something. That incident, the way you handled it, told me everything I needed to know about your character. You didn't escalate. You didn't humiliate him intentionally. You just stood your ground with dignity. That's the mark of a true leader. I appreciate that, sir. You're going to do great things, Colonel. I'm glad to have you in this command. He shook my hand and walked away. I returned to my family, feeling the weight of the day settle into something peaceful. As we prepared to leave, Gerald pulled me aside one last time. This is your night. Your achievement. But I want you to know, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to shrink yourself for me again. I met his eyes. I believe you. Good. He hugged me briefly. Congratulations, Colonel. Thank you, Uncle Gerald. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey from that moment at the elevator to this celebration. About the pain of setting boundaries, the difficulty of holding them, the slow transformation that followed. I thought about Gerald, standing in that Pentagon hallway, frozen in humiliation. And Gerald tonight, standing beside me with genuine pride. People could change. Not easily, not quickly. But with enough honesty, enough willingness, enough work, they could. And families could heal. Not by forgetting what happened, but by facing it, learning from it, building something better. The elevator moment wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. About refusing to participate in a dynamic that required me to be less than I was. About believing that I deserved respect, not because of my rank, but because of my humanity. And the real victory wasn't that moment of revelation. It was this, years later, standing in a room with family who finally saw me, accepted me, respected me. That was the legacy. Not the rank. Not the call sign. But the relationships built on truth, the family recalibrated around honesty, the life lived without apology. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at my house. My life. The life I'd built through choices, through boundaries, through the courage to be exactly who I was. And I smiled. Because I'd finally stopped pretending. And in that honesty, I'd found something more valuable than any rank or title. I'd found myself. 15 years later, I stood in my office at the Pentagon, not as a visitor, but as a 2-star general. The view from the E-ring stretched across the Potomac, the same river I'd flown over countless times during my career. My assistant knocked softly. Ma'am, your 1100 meeting is here. Send them in. I'd been selected for Brigadier General 3 years after making Colonel, then Major General 2 years ago. The stars on my shoulders carried weight I understood differently now, not as symbols of authority to wield, but as markers of responsibility to honor. The door opened, and a young captain entered, nervous but composed. She was here for a mentorship session, part of a program I'd initiated for junior officers navigating career decisions. We talked for an hour about leadership, about finding your voice, about the balance between service and self. As she left, thanking me profusely, I thought about my younger self, the quiet major who'd learned to stop shrinking. My phone rang. Gerald's name appeared. Uncle Gerald, I answered warmly. Hey, Candace. You busy? Never too busy for you. What's up? His voice carried a weight I recognized immediately. I'm retiring. Finally. After 42 years in the defense sector, I'm hanging it up. That's big news. How are you feeling? Honestly? Relieved. Tired. Ready. He paused. I'm having a small retirement thing next month. Family, some colleagues. Would you come? I know your schedule is impossible, but I'll be there, I said without hesitation. Even with the stars? He said it lightly, but I heard the old insecurity underneath. Especially with the stars, I said. Gerald, we're past that. You know that? Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, I do. Sometimes I still can't believe you show up for me after everything. You did the work. You earned it. We talked logistics, then hung up. I sat back in my chair, thinking about the years that had passed. Gerald had continued his therapy, had become someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. He'd learned to celebrate others' successes without diminishing himself. He'd built a life based on contribution rather than ego. Emily had graduated college, then law school. She was now a JAG officer in the Navy, a career choice she said was inspired by watching me. We talked monthly, and she'd become one of my most trusted confidants. My mother had thrived in her community near my base. She'd volunteered, made friends, lived fully. Last year, at 77, she'd started dating again, a retired teacher who treated her with kindness and respect. She'd learned what healthy partnership looked like. Linda had gone back to school, earned a master's degree, and now directed a nonprofit supporting military families. She'd found her own voice, separate from Gerald's shadow. The family had transformed, individually and collectively. 3 weeks later, I flew to Gerald's retirement celebration. It was held at a hotel near his home, modest but warm. About 50 people attended, family, colleagues, friends. I arrived in civilian clothes, deliberately understated. This was Gerald's day, not mine. When I entered, Emily spotted me first. She was in her navy dress whites, looking sharp and confident. She hugged me tightly. He's been nervous all week, she whispered. Worried nobody would show, worried people would think he didn't matter. He matters, I said simply. Gerald saw me then, and his face lit up. He wove through the crowd, and when he reached me, he hugged me without hesitation. You came. Of course I came. Thank you, he said, and I heard decades of gratitude compressed into those 2 words. The ceremony was simple. Gerald's former supervisor spoke about his steady reliability, his technical expertise, his growth over the years. A colleague shared a funny story about a project gone wrong that Gerald had quietly fixed. Then Gerald stood to speak. He thanked his wife, his daughter, his colleagues. Then he looked at me. I want to say something about my niece. Many of you know she's a general now. What you might not know is that she taught me the most important lesson of my life. The room quieted. 20 years ago, I made a fool of myself. I tried to pull rank I didn't have, tried to control a situation I didn't understand. And she didn't yell, didn't lecture. She just stood in her truth. And in doing that, she showed me I'd been living in a lie about who I was, what mattered, how authority works. His voice wavered slightly. She gave me the gift of humility, of seeing myself clearly. And then, even harder, she gave me the chance to change. To rebuild our relationship on honesty instead of ego. I'm the man I am today because she refused to let me stay the man I was. He raised his glass. To Candace. For having the courage to tell the truth, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The room raised their glasses. I felt tears prick my eyes. After the formal portion ended, Gerald and I found a quiet corner. That was generous, I said. What you said. It was honest, he corrected. I've spent 15 years trying to live up to the second chance you gave me. I hope I've done okay. I took his hand. You've done more than okay. You've become someone I'm proud to call family. His eyes welled up. That means everything, Candace. Everything. We stood together, watching the celebration continue around us. Emily joined us, slipping her hand into mine. Look at us, she said. 3 generations of learning how to be better. I smiled. That's all any of us can do. Later, as the party wound down, my mother pulled me aside. I'm so proud of the family we've become. Not perfect, but honest. That's your legacy, Mom. You raised me to value truth over comfort. She squeezed my hand. And you taught the rest of us to do the same. As I drove to the airport that night, I reflected on the journey. From that elevator moment to this, a family transformed, relationships rebuilt, wounds healed through consistent, honest effort. The elevator hadn't been the end of something. It had been the beginning. The beginning of a family that valued truth. That chose growth over comfort. That believed people could change if they were willing to do the work. I thought about the young captain I'd mentored that morning, about all the junior officers I'd guided over the years. I'd told them what I'd learned through living it. Real authority isn't loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists, recognized by those who matter. And the greatest act of leadership isn't commanding others. It's having the courage to stand in your truth, especially when it forces others to confront their own. Gerald had confronted his truth. And in doing so, he'd freed us both. That was the real legacy. Not the stars on my shoulders, but the family we'd built through honesty, forgiveness, and the hard work of becoming better. I boarded my flight, already thinking about tomorrow's briefings, the missions ahead, the responsibilities waiting. But tonight, I carried something else too. Gratitude. For the journey. For the growth. For a family that had learned, finally, to see each other clearly. And to love each other anyway. That's how one elevator ride flipped years of family dynamics on its head. Standing up for myself didn't just expose the truth, it forced everyone, including me, to finally see the roles we'd been playing. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where someone's disrespect snapped everything into focus? Did you ever outgrow the version of yourself your family wanted you to stay? And if you were in my shoes, would you have let him talk to you that way? Drop your story in the comments. Hit like if this resonated, subscribe for more real stories about boundaries and self-respect, and I'll see you in the next one.